Good afternoon, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for July 21st, 2013. Right now, the National Hurricane Center not monitoring any areas of potential development in the Atlantic Basin, so this is a good sign. Things are nice and quiet. If we take a look at a satellite picture, pretty much the same as yesterday and the day before and the day before that. The dry, stable atmosphere really holding strong across the Atlantic Basin, not allowing for any convective activity to develop worth mentioning at all. There's a little bit of instability and shower and thunderstorm activity off the Atlantic southeast coast, small little area of convection along the Gulf Coast, northwest Gulf of Mexico. But look out here in the tropics, just absolutely remarkable how clear everything is with no areas of convection noted whatsoever. What's the reason behind that? Well, if we take a look at a shot of the Saharan air layer here, wrong picture, let's try this again, the SAL. This is a big part of the reason, and this is also part of what we deal with in July. So this is really not a surprise. Now, all the yellow and red that you see here, this is the Saharan air layer, and it rolls off Africa with these large areas of high pressure that build out over the Atlantic, very high surface pressures, putting a cap on things literally. You can just think of this as a very big blanket that has become enveloped all over the Atlantic Basin here, and that really puts a cap on things. There is, however, a very strong, potent tropical wave now exiting the west coast of Africa, the GFS computer model playing peekaboo with development sometimes, and then it's gone, so on again, off again development with that system. That is a pretty potent tropical wave, and if I go to the satellite shot that I had sort of teased you with earlier, you can really see it there, very well defined, strong tropical wave coming off of Africa. And for the latter part of July here, that's pretty healthy, and it may try to develop some as it gets out into the Atlantic, but that stable air mass still in place, and that's going to have to be dented, put a big dent in that to allow for the convection to sustain itself. Instability levels have to really go up to allow for something to survive in that dry environment. Now, this time of the hurricane season, now we're moving through the next 10 days of the month, the last third, July 21st through the 31st, and climatology shows us that now, yes, this area, the entire tropical Atlantic, pretty much open for business. If you can recall, the last 10 days that we just went through, this area was pretty much void of any development from about 40 degrees longitude and points east. Now we've got 4 areas over the last 100 years, and certainly that's not very many. The rest of the time, nothing's ever developed. So we're not talking about prolific development out there by any means, but you can clearly see that now from Africa over to the Lesser Antilles, we do start to look for possibilities of development. Interestingly enough, the Gulf really comes to life during this 10-day time frame, whereas the last 10 days, there was only 3 development areas over the past 100 years, and then we have a pretty good cluster right off the southeast coast, and then a very large area here in the eastern Pacific, where things usually stay active throughout the hurricane season. And then notice the interesting and quite obvious void of activity in the Caribbean. For the most part, there's 3 development areas, but you have a big, vast area of the Caribbean, by and large, free of tropical cyclone development this time of year. And a lot of that has to do with the speed that the tropical waves will move through the Atlantic Basin. If you have one of those develop very quickly, and moving west very fast at a brisk pace like Chantal was, they tend to enter the Caribbean Sea undeveloped, and if they're not developed by the time they get there, they usually have to wait. So it's interesting to see that that is prevalent now, and you'll see later in the season this will start to fill in as different pressure patterns change and the tropical waves are able to slow down and gather themselves, almost quite literally, to try to develop. Now let's go over and look at the eastern Pacific, where we do have an area. I mentioned this just briefly yesterday, a small little area of clouds and showers. Now it's starting to gather itself and develop a little bit. You can see that in the graphical tropical weather outlook page. Let's go to a satellite shot of the eastern Pacific. I think that'll help. you can see it's starting to get more of that curled up shape that we look for, where the air is flowing towards a common low pressure center developing in here. This is pretty broad in scope, but I think it's going to take a few days, but this will eventually develop. And the good news is the computer model guidance indicating a track generally off in this direction away from Mexico. So as I alluded to in yesterday's video, you folks with interest in Cabo San Lucas and Acapulco, Puerto Vallarta, anywhere in that area, no worries from this system. It's going to be a broad, large system, it looks like, as it bundles all that energy. But again, the track, it looks like it'll be to the west-northwest and eventually towards this colder water out here, where it will die away like the rest have done so far this season. So let me check and see if I had any more graphics. I don't think I do. So that'll be it for today. See, things are still nice and quiet. We're in that last 10-day time period before we get to the month of August. And that's when things, as you know, really start to crank up. We will watch what goes on with that tropical wave in the eastern Atlantic. It's interesting to me, though, when I see the GFS not being consistent about development, especially when it has development on several runs in a row and then it's suddenly gone. That's a pretty good model for tropical cyclogenesis, the sniffing out, if you will, of the birth of tropical cyclones. And the GFS not real bullish on it anymore. We'll see, maybe it'll change, but I think that the environment is still just a little bit too stable, and the upward motion pattern across the Atlantic basin just not there yet. And again, that's typical for this time of year. So enjoy the quiet while it lasts. We know that in a month from now, almost with, I would say almost certainly, that we'll be seeing something out in the Atlantic basin to really keep an eye on. So use this time to prepare and think about what you'll do should a hurricane come your way. All right, well, have a good rest of your Sunday. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. Thank you for watching. I'll have more for you tomorrow.